Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. JL Scott Fishing and Eats. Hope everybody's had a wonderful weekend. Catching up with a lot of folks at the Expo down in Richmond, Virginia, as well as the Chesapeake Boat Show in Maryland. And then we are on to Knoxville, Rocky Top, Tennessee for the East Tennessee Show and the Angler's Choice Show in Martinsville coming up this weekend. Pretty exciting times. But one of the topics that kind of like ran rampant, if you will, at both Virginia and probably a lot more up in Maryland, was what kind of came out the week before the expo in terms of on social media, like it always happens, concerns that a lot of anglers had, and I was approached at both Richmond and in Maryland, as probably many content providers are. At those events where people want to talk about issues or talk about things that they've seen, was I guess the assertion that Pennsylvania was doing away with bass fishing tournaments. And my response was pretty much the same to every single person. And it was like, do you really know how ridiculous that sounds? Like, that really? Did you, succumb to the normal social media tendencies of clickbait? Because that's just not even remotely the case. And so a lot of people had a lot of discussions about it, different things that they had heard, different things that they'd seen on social media from other content providers. And look, I'm just a schmuck on YouTube like everybody else. But I think fundamentally I try to be a little bit different because I try to actually kind of do due diligence on these things and actually contact people before I come and do a video and give people the opportunity. Actually, speak to the people who are making proposals or making mandates or making regulations or all these things. We've seen this so many times, okay, in the last 5 years, okay, where it started with snakeheads. And then it started with flathead catfish, and then it was stocking, that there were no stocking efforts in our region for largemouth and smallmouth bass, and all these things. It's just it's total crap. Okay, and people get caught into these rabbit holes of then believing that the snakeheads are decimating the largemouth bass fisheries and that nobody's stocking smallmouth bass or largemouth bass in Maryland or West Virginia or Virginia, Pennsylvania, or all of these things, because someone who has a platform didn't do their due diligence, didn't actually contact the state, didn't actually contact the people that are involved, the hatcheries. Here's the thing about it, mates, is sometimes you just have to connect the dots. Why would a state spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, in hatcheries if they were not stocking bass? Right? So just think about that. Why would Pennsylvania, for example, revise their tournament permitting process for tournaments in the state of Pennsylvania if they weren't going to allow bass fishing tournaments? That probably would have been the best place to start, right? Is actually looking to see what the regulations are if you want to host a tournament in Pennsylvania on, state maintained property outside of a river, okay? That'd be the first place to start, right? Not someone's opinion, not someone's that's op-ed. That's not, if you have an audience and you have a platform, it doesn't matter if you're on YouTube or you're on a Spotify or iHeartRadio or whatever, Google Podcasts, whatever. You know what? I mean, people looking to those individuals for, kind of a sense of authority, right? And it's, they should do their due diligence on the things that get reported, right? And then social media picks up these things. And so, it didn't take long I'd seen this late last week, started on Thursday, started on Friday, then scooted to do with some bad weather and I had perfect time to be making calls on Friday because I didn't go to the show because we got 4 or 5 inches of snow, so I waited until Saturday, Sunday to take in the shows, and then then come back, and Monday I got time to like people following me up who got my messages from Friday to talk to kind of get our heads around exactly what's really happening in Pennsylvania, okay? Um, and the reality of it is nobody's canceling anything. Nobody's like ending bass fishing tournaments, okay? What's happening at this specific lake, not the entire state of Pennsylvania, is they are altering the parameters in which you can gain a permit for a tournament based on the issues that they have at Raystown Lake, okay, which is increased its traffic reportedly 300% in the last 5 years, which and this basically plays along the theme of what we've all learned about post-COVID, right? More people bought boats, more people started fishing, more people went to lakes and went outdoor during COVID and explored new places during COVID because they didn't want to be kept up inside. So that increased, right? So the infrastructure, in order to sustain that kind of volume, came under a lot of pressure, okay? And I'm going to give you a little caveat here, okay? Because I know what people are already thinking. Oh, well, he's a homer for the government. No, I'm not, okay? But I understand how government works, okay? And if you're not willing to attend the meetings, either virtually or in person, if you're not willing to engage the process to where they hear your voice, and if you're not willing to stand up for what you believe in for your fisheries, then you really have no place to bitch about anything. That's just my position. I know it offends a lot of people, or if it triggers you, sorry. But I go to the meetings. I go to when there's open sessions and town halls and people are talking about this stuff. Virginia is under a massive, massive onslaught of pressure, okay, from lobbying groups, environmental groups, to impact changes here in this state that I don't support and believe in. But if you don't go and you don't provide an opposing voice, you will get railroaded, okay? Because in the bass community, no matter what anybody tells you, no matter what anybody wants to say and beat their chest about, okay, the bass community does not engage in the politics of fisheries management. It doesn't. That's why more money is spent on trout fishing. More money is spent on trout stocking. More money is spent in conservation efforts to sustain streams and rivers and things for trout because they are politically engaged. They provide to nonprofit. Their nonprofit and their lobbying arms are so much more effective, so much more entrenched with legislators, delegates, and state senators in Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, everywhere, okay? Because they have their own conservation movement within their own community. Bass doesn't have that. The bass fishing community they don't engage. I've been to these meetings. There's maybe one or two bass, black bass, except for striped bass in Maryland. There's one or two bass guys, and there's like dozens of trout guys show up. Like, okay, dozens of catfish guys show up. Okay, the bass guys don't show up. And this is what happens. This is going to continue to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Unless bass people get off the couch and actually get to these meetings and actually raise awareness. And so, it just feeds this stuff of how, like, bass people just look at the government as being like, and I understand that. I think we're overregulated. I think there's too many laws, too many regulations, especially when it comes to the outdoor enthusiast and stuff like that. But if we don't go and we don't participate, okay, we don't have a pot to piss in, okay, because that's what we're going to be doing in the years to come, as far as other things get taken care of, and because there are environmental lobby groups in Virginia and Maryland. Like, I'm not really sure about Pennsylvania, but I'm sure that they're in Pennsylvania as well, that would just as soon change everything, okay, in sport fishing and commercial fishing, okay? They're not pro-angler, okay? They're not pro-tournament. They're not anything, okay? So there's an equilibrium and a balance between tournaments and commercial fishing and all of that stuff. If you listen to these people, their goal is to end largemouth bass fishing in the Upper Bay and Upper Potomac during the spawn, meaning no tournaments can be scheduled they're talking like early March to end of May, early June. No tournament, no catching, no fishing, okay? Think about that. All right. And so when these things happen, it's really better to like, okay, let's look at what really is happening on the ground. Let's look at what the Army Corps of Engineers is really saying. Look at what the state of Pennsylvania has released and talk to people and understand, okay, what's behind this specific, um, you know, issue. And Raystown's the largest lake solely within the confines, I believe, of the state of Pennsylvania. I think it's like 8,000 to like 8,300 surface area, okay, of in terms of acres of clear water, okay. It is a massive, massive lake surrounded by a massive amount of like forest and what it's a beautiful, beautiful place, okay. Can understand why so many people want to go there, all right. And a lot of people who live here just north of Virginia, in Maryland, across the Potomac River, and the DMV and the district, go to Raystown Lake. Okay, it's like to them, it's like the second to Deep Creek Lake. Okay, in terms of going to some place to enjoy the lake. All right, lake life. Okay, and so I want to keep that in mind about why this is happening, as far as and how it will impact tournaments. But let's really realistically look at what they said, not what someone's opinion is of what they said, but what they actually said. And so they released a statement that in an effort to increase visitor safety, minimize traffic congestion, and provide safe access for emergency vehicles, hence there were issues that happened at this specific lake. Okay, I can't recall whether it involved loss of life or not, but there were issues, okay, logistic issues in getting to and getting out safety-wise of the lake area during peak recreational season, okay, on the lake, recommended by the Baltimore District, United States Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers did not recommend to the state or to anyone that bass tournament fishing should be canceled. That is just an outright mischaracterization and misinformation sent to the public, okay? Just not true, okay? They cannot produce any evidence to support that claim, okay? And people told me over the weekend that, people were on social media saying that stuff. Like, the Army Corps of Engineers wanted to shut down fishing. Most of those guys in the Army Corps of Engineers fish, okay? Okay, so that I've met, all right? So, again, just got to think that out. So, they want fishing tournament directors, okay? People like me, tournament series for smallmouth, okay? To start and end times of their tournaments outside peak capacity weekend hours. So the peak capacity weekend hours of your average lake in Pennsylvania, probably in Virginia and Maryland as well, I'm not really sure, but I'm assuming, is between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. Those are the peak times of activity on, your average lake, okay? And during the spring, summer, whatever, on the weekends, okay? And that's really all this regulation or proposal and mandate and implementation is about. It's about the weekends. Nobody's doing anything Monday through Friday. You could have a fishing tournament on Friday without any regulation, any restrictions other than your permit, any time of day that you want, okay? This involves Saturday and Sunday only, okay? So Saturday and Sunday fishing tournaments, okay? Their peak capacity hours stated for Raystown Lake are 9 to 4, Saturday and Sunday, between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Makes perfect sense. That is the peak boating season in America. Okay? And it's also the heaviest time for boat traffic, okay, on these lakes throughout the year. You guys know this after Labor Day, things just, depending on the mild fall, or late summer, things just plummet at our lakes, okay? And if you're in Virginia, things plummet on Anna. Smith Mountain Lake, they plummet. Gaston, they plummet. They just fall off a cliff where nobody's taking their boat out in October, November, December, January, February, right? We know how that works. Makes perfect sense, okay? So, for example, they would like for a fishing tournament to begin at 8 a.m. or before, okay? So around 8 a.m., okay? Start your tournament at 8 a.m. or before sunrise, like most bass boat tournaments start, okay? And end at 4 p.m. So here's the thing that really baffles me, is when you talk to a lot of anglers wish the tournaments were longer. A lot of anglers get on that last hour bite before they've got to make that run back to the weigh-in. And they're on a bite the last hour, and they got to leave fish to go to make their run to the weigh-in. But now they're going to have an extra 2 hours to fish. So instead of a tournament ending at 3 o'clock, they can end the tournament at 4 o'clock or 4:30. Okay? Here's the other part that people are missing. When you're opening up and you're running back to that weigh-in, people know this to be true. People are running full bore because their mindset is, I'm going to be DQ'd or I'm going to be penalized if I'm late to the weigh-in, and therefore they're running their boat, okay, full on bore out to get to that weigh-in, which is dangerous and is a safety concern. Can we all agree? We've seen that happen. And we've seen issues, okay, with other boaters, with kayakers, with everything in that frame because someone is running to get back to a weigh-in. So this is another way for them to implement some safety features on this particular lake to kind of alleviate that concern. And so no one's doing away with bass tournaments in Pennsylvania. I have no idea where that came from, okay? But a bunch of people sent me stuff, from different social media platforms and different videos on YouTube and different, threads and Facebook groups. And it's just like, no one I've talked to is on board with that at all, okay? So basically, ask yourself this. In a perfect world, we'd get what we wanted, right? But most of us all begin events before 8 a.m., so the beginning of our event is not changing. If you scheduled Raystown, you don't have to. You could schedule rivers, you could schedule other lakes, you could schedule whatever that don't have any of this kind of restriction. But this was only pertinent to Raystown, okay? It's not all lakes in Pennsylvania. But even if it was, okay, I'm glad it's not, but even if it was, most all of us, I can't think of one tournament that started after 8 o'clock. I don't know. Put it in the comments if you've ever seen it, if you've ever been in a tournament that started after 8 o'clock. Barring weather or something, fog or late delay or whatever. But I'm just, okay? So it's not the beginning of the tournament that has been impacted. It's the end of the tournament that's been impacted, okay? And so instead of ending the tournament at 2:30 or 3:30, I know a lot of kayak events, in our region usually wrap 3 o'clock. They would just extend it to 4 o'clock, okay? I don't know if most people would have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. You have a problem with that? I think these tournaments are cut off too soon. Our series is going to run longer anyway, okay? So we're going to be one of the longer series. I think cutting it off at why do they cut it off at 2 or 3 or whatever? It's so they can have a ceremony or they can have an event or people got to travel to go back home. But again, think about this from the perspective of that lake and PA and the Army Corps of Engineers, where they think they have too many people that are on the property and at the ramp because there may be a weigh-in, which makes it congested, right? There may be more people coming for that event for the weigh-in that aren't necessarily on the lake, but they're congesting the ramp and creating kinds of issues. They also open up the opportunity for these events, if you talk to them, for encouraging these tournament directors to go catch photo release and to do away with weigh-ins. Because there's a lot of lobbying going on right now in the environmental and their conservation community to do away with weigh-ins. Okay? Because weighing fish is detrimental to the fishery. Because we know what the mortality rates are of fish that have been in live wells for hours and hours. This doesn't impact the kayak fishing community, of course, because they're at the forefront of catch photo release. Okay? It's the boating community. Okay? And so there are efforts in Pennsylvania and Virginia and Maryland to do away with weigh-ins. Okay? In the interest of the fish. Okay? Whether you agree with that or not. It's going to happen. Whether it's going to be 2 years from now or 5 years from now, it is going to happen. there will reach a point in most of these states where weigh-ins will go away because of the technology and everything, and plus what's happening in fisheries with fish populations. It's going, and this could be, they're not requiring things to be catch photo release, but it could be just the first step in encouraging these tournament directors to go with catch photo release. So it states, tournament directors wishing to schedule their activities such as launch times, weigh-ins, prize distribution during peak capacity hours are requested to follow the established safety measures that will assist in mitigating the impact of their event or on other lake users who will be assessing the same areas. Nobody's banning fishing in Pennsylvania, okay? They're trying, with their permitting process, making tournament directors aware that this is the time frames that they would like to see these weigh-ins, or will require these weigh-ins to take place going forward at this particular lake. Now, this lake could be the example that may be used if it works and safety issues decline to then carry over to other lakes in Pennsylvania. That certainly could be the case. Slippery slope certainly could be the case, okay? Project staff will continue to evaluate permit applications on a case-by-case basis and will contact tournament directors to discuss alternative scheduling options. So when you file that permit, of course, you are listing when you intend to host your event, the date, the time, the weigh-in, all of those things. They may look at that. You could put like 8 to 3, and they're going to contact you, and you're going to work out with them on that particular day alternative measures to align with the policy before they approve your permit. Okay? So you're going to know full well, okay? And it's only going to take one knucklehead. It's only going to take one knucklehead tournament to violate the parameters of the permitting process, and we all will then face the brunt of that, because then they will deny permits. Okay? They'll deny. And those lobbies that want to get permits removed from lakes everywhere can't really do it for rivers, but they can for lakes. Okay? A lot of lakes are owned by the state. A lot of lakes are reservoirs, drinking water. There are plenty of things that they could throw at to have this stuff done. Rivers are completely different. Okay? Because a lot of times these rivers flow through multiple states, multiple counties, multiple jurisdictions, and all that stuff. Okay? But lakes, they can take it completely away. If one knucklehead tournament director or tournament series violates this, okay? It's not one of those things that you want to do. All right, tournament directors may be asked to meet special conditions for tournaments that cannot be scheduled outside of peak capacity times. They will also limit the number of tournaments on days. So it's imperative, if you're in Pennsylvania and you want to schedule this, okay, or I'm in Maryland and I want to schedule, an event on that lake, that you do it early. That you do it early in the season so you get it. Because they are going to limit the number of bets. So they're not going to allow, if there's 2 boater tournaments on that lake, right, or 2 or whatever it is, they're going to look at the capacity of boats on the lake, right? And then if you want to have your kayak bass fishing tournament, it isn't going to happen. Okay? It's not going to happen. And it's not going to seem like it's fair, but that's just how it's going to be. So you're going to want to get your permitting in early, and you're going to want to get your time frames, launch at 7 a.m., 8 o'clock, 4:15, 4:20 return, whatever. Okay? Now, listen, there's no way, I know I've already had this conversation yesterday in Maryland. How are they going to know? Well, they're not really going to know. Like, they'll know when your weigh-in is, but they're not going to know that if you come back at 3 o'clock. The problem is, you come back at 3 o'clock, and you're out at the ramp and you're doing whatever, you got bass in your live well for a weigh-in. It's really not kind of conservation conscious to keep those bass in those live wells for hours on end, because your weigh-in is at 4:30, So, keep that in mind, because I'm sure people will, like they always do. Remember, most people don't read rules for tournaments. Can we agree on that? Most people do not read rules. They have to be handheld to read rules. So they're probably not going to read all of the regulations. And even though their tournament director is going to say, don't return back to the boat ramp before 4 o'clock, Knuckleheads will return back to the boat ramp before 4 o'clock. Okay? That's just the way it is. And like I said, it's only going to take 1 or 2 times or an event to totally violate this and blow this out of the water. Or we see an increase in dead floating fish in Raystown Lake at the boat ramp because everybody's bass died because they had a weigh-in at 4:30 and they came in at 3 or 2:30 or whatever. It's just one of those things. So everyone's gonna have to like work beat, but bass tournaments are not being canceled in Pennsylvania. Again, how ridiculous does that sound, right? It sounds ridiculous enough for you to click on it, right? Right? I mean, that's what I got from most people. It was like, well, I said, well, you read it, right? I said, well, they got what they wanted from you. I was like, if it was on like YouTube or like or on Spotify or something, you listen to it. And so, it's just one of those things. And you can get in. You can look on this stuff. I'll link it on my Facebook page for Raystown, where you can find everything from the PA Fish and Boat Commission, who issues the permits for places like Raystown. And it also has the I'm trying to remember, USACE. So it's USACE, which is a land management agency. Some states have that. So they can approve or disapprove requests as well in accordance with what they're called special use activities. So a tournament is a special use permit. Most people don't understand that because most people aren't getting these things. Tournament directors have to deal with that crap. And there are plenty of laws in each state that regulate all of that stuff. So just wanted to cover that in the video today, and just, if you got any questions or comments, you can reach out to me. You can message me on Facebook. If you want the information, if you want the actual documentation and stuff of actually the real wording for what's happening at Raystown and what's going to happen in Pennsylvania from the PA Game and Fit and from the Army Corps of Engineers, I will provide it to you and I will send it to you. But again, I cannot reiterate enough. Bass tournaments are not being canceled in Pennsylvania. All right, mates.